Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast. This episode, we speak with an NBL Hall of Famer, TV host and commentator for over 2 decades. He is generously vulnerable and raw in his discussions about both his personal life and his career. Ladies and gentlemen, the charismatic Mr. Steve Carfino. Mr. Steve Carfino.
How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot. My partner is helping me. This is, as you could probably see, it came from a different computer. This is Libby.
Hey.
Well, welcome, Liv. Thanks very much for making the time, mate, to come on.
Oh, my pleasure. I saw your interview with Brett. That was really good. So I was happy to do it.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I think this is going to be a really interesting and really cool podcast episode for a lot of the fans because it's going to be a little bit of a trip down memory lane and a little bit of I guess, bit of our childhood for a lot of us going back because, you know, for so many years, whether we were in the kitchen or another room in the house, and then we'd hear your voice and we knew the hoops were on. And, you know, I think yourself and John Casey are probably the two that really stand out as really identifying with the whole sport as a whole. So I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, as I do with any of our episodes, I sort of take a snapshot of your career, but obviously we haven't seen you on the main screen for a little while. So before I go through that, do you want to sort of fill the listeners in on where you're at these days and what keeps you busy?
Yeah, I'm not sure if everybody knows that the broadcasts, they don't fly the commentators around anymore. They work out of a, what is that? Whatever, a pod, so if I were paying the bills, I'd probably be doing the same, so you don't have to fly them there, put them in a hotel, hire a car, the whole bit. So that was something that Larry had to really cut down on the cost of the broadcast. They were costing between $30,000 and $50,000 every single time they did a game. And so when Fox Sports stopped taking care of the production of it and they outsourced it, it was a massive expense. So they had to cut back on that. And most of the commentators are from Melbourne, even though, Shane Heel and various commentators would fly around a little bit, Homicide as well. Those are some of the cuts that were made. It was available for me to do the sideline, but, I just thought, well, this is a great time for me to transition into something else. So then I went to Barker College. I was the director of basketball there, and it was like a 70-hour-a-week job. And, it started out, I felt like, man, they just had a brand new, no one really knows how much the facility costs. It's a 5-court facility with 2 weight rooms, classrooms, and meeting rooms. It's a beautiful facility. So I thought, let's just try and make this program match the facility. So one of the things I did, I thought it was a stroke of genius, by the way, was to build on my relationship with Basketball New South Wales. Had the trials there for boys and girls, like the top 81 kids in the state got to see that facility, and then all of a sudden, bang, there's 20 requests for people to enroll at the school or transfer into that school. So that was a real successful thing. But in the end, it turned into more admin work, which isn't my strong suit. I'm more of a people person. Put me in somebody's living room and, I got them waving the Barker colors, so it just wasn't a great fit. So when COVID came, it was like, let me take some time off because the kids weren't able to play. And I took some time off leave, and then I just got used to it. I lived over an hour away from Hornsby and Barker College. So the travel and the admin, just decided it wasn't something that I wanted to do 70 hours a week. So, and this is my second time around. I was divorced in 2010. And so got a lovely partner now, Elizabeth, and just trying to do it a little bit better this time. And
no, that's right.
and spend time, quality time, go on walks and holiday together. And so, it was a transition time for me. So I had to back off a little bit from the basketball.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for filling us in there. Do you still do, because I know you were doing like some private gigs with corporations and those sort of things. Do you still do that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I kind of got used to not working. I was playing golf twice a week, and I was enjoying that, but I think pretty much just ran out of money. So I'm starting to ramp up back into that one. I'm doing a couple of events with a guy named Rod Harris, who used to work with me at the Sydney Kings when I was the vice president there. And so he's got an event company, and so he's penciled me in for a few gigs as the MC. So I used to MC the Super Bowl party at the casino, which was, man, I would have paid money to go to that. So when they paid me money to actually be one of the hosts, that was a lot of fun. So I did that for several years, and this year was the first time they finally came to their senses and, like, man, do we need this many? We need this many hosts? So I wasn't able to do it, but I had a good run there. But yeah, I do corporate speaking. So sometimes it's just like basketball events, or maybe some CEO of a major corporation was a basketball fan, and so I've gone there and told some funny stories. And I'm more of a storyteller, so I quite enjoy those gigs. And sometimes they'll put it like, oh, like we need my sales team to be more motivated, and so I'll talk about the positioning yourself to succeed and things like that, things that I'm comfortable with, because I turn everything into a basketball analogy, or at least a sports analogy.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people can relate to that, though. And a lot of people learn a lot more from stories anyway, I think, and it's a cathartic experience for you as the speaker and for those listening as well. So it's good to hear that you're still out and about, doing a bit of that stuff, because I think, obviously it's up to you how you live your life, but to have all that knowledge and value, to be able to pass that on and not just, hold on to it, I guess, is something that's, really generous. What I will do now is sort of take you back to the start. We'll take our listeners back. I've just sort of written these down so I don't get any of them wrong. Well, hopefully not anyway. So in terms of professional career or heading in that way, you played your basketball at Iowa in college from 80 to 84. First season, made the Final Four under Coach Lute Olson. And then obviously progressed your way through, because as I can see, in 84, you ended up being the MVP of Iowa in that final year, and then were drafted by the Boston Celtics in 84, which we'll get back to in a little while, because obviously, as some may know, back then you stepped away for a little bit before coming to Australia and playing for the good old Hobart Devils. Some of us that watched the Swish tapes back in the day will remember the Hobart Devils and other players as well, like Wayne McDaniels and Kelvin Telford and those sort of guys. And in your first year, 1986, in the NBL, runner-up as the MVP. Who won the MVP in that year? I didn't actually have that.
Leroy Loggins.
Leroy Loggins, right? Pretty tough
Fair
competition
enough,
huh? there. Yeah, right. But you were in the all NBL first team in that year as well, and obviously played another year there before going to Sydney, where I guess a lot of people probably remember you even more for, just because it's probably more recent, and your average scoring there was in those mid-20s. So you played there from 88 to 91. And then despite a relatively short career compared to some others that have had your success, we usually would link to a 15, 16-year career, considering the esteem you were held in. So you achieved a hell of a lot in a short period of time. And as such, you were inducted into the NBL Hall of Fame and the Sydney Kings 25th anniversary team. Going on from that, as a lot of us will know, if you've been a basketball fan at all, you had a 22-year career in commentary, working with both Channel 10 and Fox Sports as commentator, a host, and did include producing some of your own shows. And what's intriguing as well, and we'll get into this later on, as I like to do in any podcast, is dig a little bit deeper about the person and their values and what drives them. Because a lot of podcasts can just reel off the stats and those sort of things. But something with you, is like you include things like acting, voiceovers. You even for a charity did some stand-up comedy routine. I mean, just your willingness to like be uncomfortable, where others would step back from that. So I look forward to sort of having a chat about that. But I guess before we go through that in detail, something else listeners might know, I certainly don't, was it always basketball? Was that the main thing in your childhood? who influenced you? Did dad play? Did mum play? What was the go there?
Yeah. I mean, wow, that was a very thorough background you just did on me. I was like, oh yeah, wow, you found that. Yeah, thanks. That was quite an
Oh, well
intro.
deserved.
Very flattering. Thank you. My family is very sporty. Like my father, he had back then it was yards, it wasn't meters. And oh, let's face it, in America, they just continue to go with the feet and inches and the imperial system. So my father did the 220, and he had that record for the CEO, the Catholic Youth Organization. He had that record for like 20 years. He was super fast and athletic, played football. He got polio when he was about 15 or 16, and stunted his growth. And one leg was noticeably slimmer than the other one. So who knows how far he was able to go with his career. But he married my mom pretty young at about 20. And so my mother is very athletic as well, because apparently the only person that could outrun my dad was my mother. So
Wow.
we come from a sporting background.
Yeah, right.
And my parents went to every single sporting event. If my brother and I played, and we have a sister in the middle as well, but if we had games on the same day, they would just split up, and my mom would go to my brother's game, my dad would come to mine. My dad was a coach. My sister had 3 undefeated seasons at the middle school where she coached. So she's like a Bobby Knight. She is like the nicest person, but she is a maniac when she's coaching. For some reason, for some reason, the girls love her at the school, and all the kids love her at school. She's very supportive, but a very sporting background. Our sport was mainly baseball. My dad was a very good baseball player. He went to a tryout for the Milwaukee Brewers back then. And he played in the service. As a matter of fact, he went to the Air Force. And never did any combat, never did any combat, because his commanding officer was a baseball nut. So he recruited all the best baseball players in his division, and they just went around Guam and Japan and the Philippines and played baseball. So he never saw any action. All he did was play baseball while he was in the service. Yeah. So that was, basically my dad was, he worked the night shift so he could have the days with us, so he could be coaching our teams and, hitting ground balls to us, playing pickle out in front of the house. He had to make 10 shots. We had a hoop, up against the garage, had to make 10 shots before he could go into the house. My brother was very super talented. So, he'd hit 10 in a row, and I'd be out there like an hour and a half, and for me to hit 10 in a row. And so it was just always games going on like that. And my brother's 4 years older than me, but Don was drafted out of high school by the Baltimore Orioles in baseball. He was a top shortstop in the state of California, which is, a lot of good baseball players coming out of high school. So he was just a tremendous clutch player, great hitter, great fielder. He also played football for St. John Bosco's, which one of the top high school football programs in the country. Them and Mater Dei in the same conference are in the top 10 nationwide every year. As a matter of fact, Mater Dei has a quarterback that just went number 1 in the NFL draft. He went to Alabama. I can't remember his name, but he's like 5'11", fast as lightning. Just that's the type of programs that that we've been around. But my brother being 4 years older than me, that was just the bar. Don was drafted by the Golden State Warriors out of college. We played. Yeah, I was 5th all-time leading scorer when he left University of Southern California. So that was what was in front of me. And my brother was great. Like, my brother's a little not as outspoken as I am. So, he used to take me, I'd break the ice if there's a couple of ladies he wanted to chat to. So he'd take little Steven, and I love to chat. So I would get into games that I didn't belong in, so people would be like, hey, Don, you want to run with us? We'd be playing in a pickup game. We'd go to the park to play some pickup. And they'd be like, Don, you want to run with us? And he's like, oh, you got a spot for my brother? They'd be like, oh, yeah, man, I guess so. So I had to learn how to contain my man, keep him out of the paint. I had to learn how to not take shots when the game was on the line. I had to kind of earn my stripes. I learned, I would say a very advanced basketball IQ at a young age, just being thrown into those situations. And so, I look back on it, it was like a perfect storm for developing a top class athlete. So, I've got to give it to my dad, my mom, for being very supportive, taking us to everything, like I said, coaching and being a parent, and those drives home were, maybe and now in all the political correctness now, maybe what my parents told me, wouldn't really wash over too well because they were very direct and to the point. But, those drives home where they were, like if you didn't play well, you'd hear why. They were very fair, but very tough, and so, I always wanted to be the best. And so under those circumstances, I was allowed to flourish.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, they do say you're the average of the top 5 people you hang around most. And if you're in a family that's that driven and that high standard, I guess it's only natural that you lift yourself up to that as well. So on that note, with a lot of baseball, did you also play baseball, or was it mostly basketball for you?
No, I played baseball. I was a very good baseball player.
Yeah.
I just liked basketball more,
Yeah.
and as I got older, I think when I was 16, my batting average, I sustained an injury. I slid into second base and my cleat got caught and I ripped my ankle all up. And so I was out. I had to have surgery. And, my doctor was Dr. Lombardo, who was the doctor of the Los Angeles Lakers. He used to sit on the end of their bench. And so, he said, look, it's probably unlikely that you'll be able to play at the same level that you are before the injury, but if you follow my instructions and the rehab to the letter, no more, no less, there you'll have a possibility of that. So, I came out of that just hungry and discipline and I was able to, I still, I felt like, I've been told still had world-class quickness, after I came back after that injury, but I think it just taught me to, be able to deal with, things that pop up. Injuries happen all the time. You might go to a school and, like when I first started lifting weights when I was at the University of Iowa, my game was just, went downhill. But, I think that, with the background that I had with my family, they always, said, look, you have to earn your way in. You don't always get thrown into a situation where they're going to recognize your skills, or maybe there's somebody that does something there better than you. You have to find a way to get on the court and stay on the court. The coach has got to believe that when you're out on the court, that it's a better team, even if you have a lesser role. So my freshman year at Iowa, I didn't play that. I think I averaged about less than 5 points a game, but every time I got in, I'd make sure I'd push the break and get it to our shooting guard, who was a guy named Bobby Hansen, who played in the NBA. And he played on that Jordan team when they threw all the subs in and they got back in that game against Portland. And he was a 6'6" guard. He was fearless. And so, I was always kicking the ball up ahead, put me in. I could turn my guy defensively. And so the coach, when he wanted a tempo change, he was confident. Lute Olson was confident to throw me in. And so I was able to get minutes that the other freshman, wasn't able to get. He ended up transferring a guy named Dennis Johnson. And he was, 6'3", 195, a tremendous defender, long arms, but he just didn't have the ability to hit shots and handle the ball well enough to move the ball up the court. So I got that nod. And then by the time I was a sophomore at Iowa, I was still playing behind Kenny Arnold and Bob Hansen. They were the starting guards, and they had been for a couple of years. And so Bobby Hansen had a stress fracture in his foot. We played in the Houston Kettle Classic with Clyde Drexler and Akeem Olajuwon, Larry Mishaw, Michael Young. They had 4 guys that went in the first round. And so that was a very tough team. So we lost to them in the final. And then we went on like a 8-game tear in the Big Ten. We were ranked. So my sophomore year, we lost a couple of key players after my freshman year. And so we had a couple of freshmen, Michael Payne, who was a McDonald's All-American, and a guy named Greg Stokes were our new bigs, but they were young. They were freshmen. So preseason, we were ranked to finish 9th out of 10 teams. And then we got in the Big Ten and we ran off like 8 in a row. And I was in the starting 5 because Bobby Hansen was hurt. So then when Bobby came back, Lute Olson made it, one of those Tom Brady decisions when he played in front of Drew Bledsoe. He said, we got our starting 5. So Bobby Hansen led us in scoring coming off the bench, but I started. the rest of the year. And that was kind of where my career at Iowa took off.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's also a good lesson for those coaches that are listening as well, to instill that in your players, that you know, the players don't always need to be the star, and you find your opportunities, play your role as you obviously did, and you found those, someone who could stop the ball in that first year, someone who could get the ball to, in your case, like Bobby Hansen, and then eventually your time will come. I think these days, it's very different. Everyone needs to be the star of the show and those sort of things. And some people might see that, like even just looking at your stats, from your NBL years, obviously, you were a star, but to see that you were also willing to, to, I guess, build a foundation and just build yourself up and do as the coach required and earn your stripes, so to speak. I think that's a valuable lesson. Thanks for sharing about your Iowa experience. I'd like to sort of have a chat to you about, obviously, post that you were drafted by Boston, the Celtics, and then delisted shortly after that. I guess in this day and age, with agents and more accessibility to the rest of the world, taking some time off would be, or stepping away would be pretty rare. It's just, where do we go now? What country do we go and play in? What are our other options? So can you talk us sort of through what happened in that situation and why sort of that break?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before, but I felt pretty strongly about it for a couple of different reasons. I watched my brother, who was 4 years older than me, and he had success, everywhere he went, he was able to get by with his talent. And then, he just didn't have the ability to work hard because he was just good at everything. I mean, we're talking about a kid that's never been on the golf range before, but he's a single figure handicap golfer. I mean,
Yeah,
who
right.
does that? He could go out and bowl at 200 right now. He was just good at everything. So I watched my brother, the disappointment of him not making it, with the Golden State Warriors, and he just got outworked. He got outworked, ironically, by a guy that he played Little League with and grew up with, Lorenzo Romar, who's ended up being the coach at Washington, and now he's a coach at Pepperdine. But he had he was a bit of an NBA journeyman. But my brother, everywhere they went, my brother was better than him in Little League, better than him in high school. Like, not only was he better than him, my brother was going to schools that Lorenzo wanted to go to. So he had to go to another school. He had to go to junior college because he didn't get picked up by a Division I school. So he went locally, had a stellar career at Cerritos College. And then he wanted to go to USC. They ended up going with somebody else. So he went to Washington. And then when they had the draft, my brother was drafted in the 5th round by Golden State, and Lorenzo was picked in the 7th round. But Lorenzo just, he just came up short all the time and just had the ability to work. So that's probably how I kind of started, because I grew up with my brother. I lived in the same house. So, had that work ethic. But I saw my brother go through that disappointment of not making it. Now, when my brother didn't make it basketball wise, he tried out and went to this, tryout where all these guys try and make it in Major League Baseball. And they have these tryouts at Blair Field in Long Beach. And so they have these tryouts. They might pick one guy in an entire year. So my brother goes, for the first time, goes 3 for 5, makes a play in the hole, behind the third baseman at shortstop, and throws a guy out, and has a great day. And the Milwaukee Brewers pick him up, to play like single A or double A or whatever it may be. But, Don's a 21-year-old rookie now, so he's impatient. He's like, you got to move me up or I'm going to leave. And they're looking at him like, who the hell are you? Yeah. So he leaves. And so I guess I didn't want to be coming out of school. I think, and it's one of my regrets, and that's why I think it's great that you asked me that question, because I've never really had to answer it before. But if I have a regret, it's that I didn't persevere, in the CBA back then, like the D League, the G League now. I didn't persevere. I didn't I just saw an opportunity where a guy was like, look, I'll bankroll this sporting goods store, Steve Carfino's Action Sports in Iowa. And I thought, well, I don't want to be this pathetic guy that just doesn't understand when his career has come to an end. So I just kind of gave it up a little too easy. And then so I would play in summer league games and I would just be killing people. And as a matter of fact, like I went back after I was in Australia. I'll go back to that time. But when I came back when I was in Australia, I hadn't finished my degree in communications, radio, and television. So I had a semester to do, and BJ Armstrong was the star guard there. And so every day before official practice, we would scrimmage. And Ed Horton, who ended up playing, I think he was drafted by the Hawks, and Les Jepson, they were the two centers at Iowa. And every day they would pick, it'd switch who had the first pick when they were picking the teams. And every day they would pick me instead of BJ, which just infuriated him. So he's coming at me. He's a college All-American. He's going to go in the first round. He's coming at me hard every week, but I'm a grown man, like I'm playing professionally now. I'm not averaging 11 points a game. I'm averaging 30, and I got to play well for our team to win. So I'm playing like a man. He's playing like, he was still a great player. BJ and I are still friends now, but, it was that competitiveness that I felt like I had when I was playing those summer league games during that time when I was managing my own store and just dying a slow death, going to happy hour after working hours, and just guys that I'm actually crushing in summer league games are getting jobs overseas and things like that. So I did it for less than a year. And then I just, I got that call from Dave Atkins. And funny enough, Dave Atkins and Brian Gorgon, you got to remember there's no mobile phones back then. And so Dave Atkins and Brian Gorgon called me in the same week. And I just thought it was the same person. I just ended up calling Dave Atkins, and he asked me if I wanted to play in Hobart. Brian Gorgon was offering me a job to play in Ballarat, but I never spoke to Brian.
Sorry, how did they, I guess, were they aware of what you were doing in the summer league? How did they get tipped off about yourself?
I think that they, because Brian's father, Ed, recruited me to go to college at Loyola Marymount.
Right.
And so I knew, and I had played against Brian's brother, Greg Gorgon, who averaged like 43 points a game in high school at Crescenta Valley High School, which is the same place Brian Gorgon went. So they had a basketball family, and, I'm playing in summer league games back in LA, and basketball is a small community. Everybody knows everybody. So
right.
They probably were like, look, looks like Steve Carfino is playing again. He's looking to play overseas. Maybe that's how they got the word. But Dave Atkins watched me on the Iowa Television Network because he's from Des Moines, Iowa. And so he just thought, I'm going to take a guard and I'm going to take a big man. And he ran into Steve Waite, who was a teammate of mine. He was the guy that made the shot against Georgetown to put Iowa in the Final Four. And, that was the only thing that was, that was incorrect. I didn't play on that Final Four team. That was the 79-80 team. I came in 80-81. Yeah. Right. So Ronnie Lester was their star guard.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that I went there, because it was like this team went to the Final Four. Lute Olson was so charismatic and all that type of stuff. So, so to get back to your original question, I know I'm kind of branching off, but
no, you're right.
Yeah, it was. I didn't want to be that guy that was chasing an impossible dream. Because I watched my brother and other stars in the LA area, just kind of going to these small towns and, in Montana and CBA, teams and cities, and never making it. I thought, well, let me just pursue this opportunity at the sporting good. And then I realized, I hadn't had my fair share of basketball. So that's why I had the break.
Yeah, no, thanks for being so open about that, because, it's something that I guess is unusual in this day and age, but and thanks for being vulnerable and sort of letting us know how you feel. I think that will resonate with a lot of people in terms of, family dynamics and or friends and that, and one that seems to get it easy and the other that has to work hard. But there's another lesson in that as well. So everyone's getting an education today. In terms of when you came to Australia in that late 80s period, I asked Scott Fisher the same question. Was basketball a full-time job for you then? He said for some it was, for some they, like Brian Gorgon, I remember, had to be a PE teacher, L Westover, that sort of stuff. What was it like for you when you arrived?
I think that was a true test of how much I love the game. And I love it to this day. I go to these basketball facilities and beat up on some unsuspecting kid that sees my gray hair and thinning hair, and they play off me. I hit a shot and they have a poor closeout, and then I'll get one leg past them and get them a little leg lock and slowly take them to the basket, use my 100 kilos of girth to lean on them and score. But I mean, I love the game, and that was a true testament, because I had to work at a Canterbury rugby store, so I am an immaculate folder, because I had to fold those rugby shirts and put them in those little cubicles, and so I did that. I made $183 a week doing that, I think, because I had to leave early to get to training some days, and then we trained at a place called, I believe it was Warren Stadium, and
Right.
it was, I had gone from Iowa where I got fan mail, and I never played in front of an empty seat. We had the field house my first 2 years, and then my junior and sophomore year, we had the brand new Carver Hawkeye Arena. So I never played in front of an empty seat in 4 years.
Yeah,
And
just
so
for
when
the
I got the
listeners on that one, so the field house I've looked up, and it's basically the same capacity as Rod Laver Arena in Melbourne. So just to give you guys some reference there.
Okay, I'll give you even a little bit more reference.
Oh, go for it.
Before we had official practice, which started November 15th, we just had to play shirts and skins pickup games. So the coaches weren't allowed to coach us. So we just shirts and skins, no clock or anything like that. And so on Saturday mornings, we used to have shirts and skins scrimmages before the football game. So the football game, say, started at 1:00. The people from Iowa all over the state would be driving their RVs and having those tailgate parties that they have, those big barbecues like in the parking lot of the football stadium. So they would walk over to the gym to watch us play, and I still can't believe it to this day. Over 8,000 people would show up just to watch us play shirts and skins. That's almost filling up the old entertainment center,
Yeah, you got a good
where the
rep when
Sydney
that's
Kings
happening.
play.
Yeah.
So that's how basketball crazy it was at the University of Iowa. I kind of forgot what we were talking about. What was I talking about?
No, that's
before?
okay. Yeah, no, I was just asking if it was that full-time job sort of stuff, and you were saying how different it was down in Tassie from having the fan mail at Iowa and the big build up to sort of a bit, I'm assuming, a bit quieter situation down there.
Yeah, and then the second year in Hobart, I folded rugby shirts, and then I got a better contract because I had a really good season individually, and we went from 2-24 to 9-17, and that year we knocked off at home the team that was ranked number one. It was number one in the standings. 3 times we beat the Canberra Cannons, we beat the Brisbane Bullets, and then in '87 we beat the defending champion Adelaide 36ers. And so, we got some big scalps down there. So I was able to, to make I think maybe $2,000 a month. And so, but I was always worried about what I was going to do, once my basketball career was over. So I worked at the Tasmanian Film Corporation, just carrying equipment around and just kind of hanging around there, seeing if I could pick up some skills, for life after basketball.
Yeah, that brings me to another question that the listeners will know I ask all the guests, because obviously this is a time capsule podcast, so we're chatting to those that have are former players. At what point did you think about retirement? You've obviously answered it there, but you're the first one, given we're only on episode 4, but you're the first one that's actually, I guess, so early on put some forethought into what you're going to do. And even in college, you seem to be studying the same realm of work or same industry. I guess my question to you is, was it your parents or an agent that suggested you prepare for life after basketball so early on, or was it just something you wanted to do?
I think because my brother is 4 years older than me, I used to experience things, on a personal level 4 years in advance. I got to watch his his triumphs, and I got to watch, his disappointments as well. And I think that, seeing my brother get a little bit lost after, he didn't make the Golden State Warriors, and then, dropped off the team, dropped off out of the organization in baseball, and just see him, just be lost for a period of time. I got to see, man, I really don't want to do that. Like, I know it's disappointing, and I know that basketball players, even this present day, are baffled once their careers are finished, whether it's due to an injury or just it's their time to, because Father Time, waits for nobody. Like, soon as it's a quick descent. Like when you go from being the player that's significant to insignificant, happens really quickly, and it's never pleasant. So, I think I was always concerned about that. And so that's, when I auditioned for the job at Channel 10, and I worked with Bill Woods, like that background, I worked at, for 2 summers, I worked at KWWL in Waterloo, KWWL, Waterloo, Cedar Rapids. Yeah, that's how it goes. So I worked as an intern there, and I used to do interviews, and, I got sent to press day for football season in the Big Ten, at the Marriott in Chicago. And it's funny, during that time, I saw Wayne Gretzky walking through with a mink coat, like that was a memory I'll never forget. And so, I was able to, because of that disappointment with my brother, I think it just got me thinking, I really want to do this. And in saying that, it's not like I had this grand plan and it all went to plan. But I think that one of the things that you asked me, and I thought was really interesting, like, I've tried a lot of things and I've gotten out of my comfort zone. I think I've been out of my comfort zone so many times, and, I haven't succeeded, but I was like, God, it wasn't as bad as I thought. The failure doing that wasn't as bad as I thought. Even when I sang the national anthem, that came for the first time, that came through an accident, because I was working for the Sydney Kings. And they said, all right, in the Monday morning meeting, they're like, okay, what are we going to do about the anthem singer? And so I said, I got this really good guy. His name's Doug Williams. He's a tremendous musician and great voice. And so I said, I know this guy. And so I was working for Lorraine Landon. She was the one who was running the meeting with the Kings. Yep. She's a legendary administrator. And so she was like, okay, I'll get back to you. And her story is a little different. My story is she didn't get back to me. Yeah. So I didn't pursue it. And so she was like, oh, like, Steve, have you organized the anthem singer? And I was like, no, I haven't. I thought you were going to get back to me. She was like, oh, great. She was really disappointed. And so I said, hey, I'll do it. And so she thought she'd teach me a lesson and say, all right, you're going to do it. And so I've always wanted to do it, like, it's one of those things on the bucket list. I've always wanted to do it. And so I thought, holy smokes, like, I'm going to have to learn the anthem, because I can't look at the words, like that. And to this day, I'm not sure if it's in history's page, let every stage, or in history's stage, let every page, like, that was the thing I was most nervous about. And I didn't know if I could have music accompany me, if I could follow that. I wasn't sure if I could do it. And I've seen that go horribly wrong when people sing the national anthem. They're out of key, they're all this type of stuff. And I didn't know what key I sang in or anything like that. So I just thought, I'll do it a cappella. And so, yeah, there's one of those times, it was just like, I've just been willing to just try things. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but when I had children, and, you say, you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to work through this. You got to do that. You can't be afraid to fail. Don't get in your own way. Don't let your fear get in the way of you, trying new things and being able to branch off and surprise yourself at the things that you can do. You can say that as a parent, but when your kids see you doing it over and over again, it's a much stronger message.
Yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that's one of the reasons, I wanted you on here, is because I think that people are too afraid of failure a bit these days, and you just put yourself out there and see what happens. It's the same thing with this podcast, essentially in basketball circles, I'm a nobody, and I'm just a big fan, that wants to chat to former players and bring it back and share stories. And so my whole motto is just shoot your shot, and if it falls and it fails, then so be it. But sometimes it'll land, and we'll get great guests on like yourself. So I think just in general, that's for everyone. If just go for it and stuff it up, and don't have any regrets. And so I'm glad you shared that. And I think there might be an opening. I think I was thinking when I researched and saw that you do singing, I thought he's done the anthem. There's an Olympics coming up in 2032. If Australia make the gold medal game, I reckon we get you out there and we get you to belt out the anthem one more time, and then we bring home the gold. I reckon that would be like perfect. So we've got a long way to go yet, but I'm going to pencil that one in. Now, on my next question, it was obviously, as you just mentioned, looking at work outside of basketball, or in your case, merging the two because potentially media work that's involved in basketball. When you make a move like you did from Hobart to Sydney, is that something? Obviously, you're going there for basketball to play for the Sydney Kings and whatnot, but is that something you chat to the club about in terms of, look, I'm also doing this going forward? Can you help me out with getting into that line of work when I come up there? Is that a discussion you have, or you don't have that? You just do it yourself?
That's a really good question, but I don't think it. I think now, if I were to do it, I would have been more prepared, and been able to do that. And I think that people are that way inclined a lot more now. They're, like, this is what I'm doing. I'm working on my brand, But to be honest with you, no, not at all. I just thought there would be more opportunity in Sydney. So when Mike Wroblewski was interested in me coming to play for the Sydney Kings, he said, look, Sydney is like something that just hasn't been conquered, and I think that you, with your ability and your personality, you could really, create a lot of opportunities for yourself. So I think that, I was able to branch off and do a lot of things with the help of the Kings organization, because I think they were one of the first teams that had like corporate boxes, and really encouraged, them to have, say, maybe a corporate night at our training facility. So therefore, I was able to run those anytime, say Coca-Cola or Reebok were one of our major sponsors, and they would ask me to do a basketball promotion, at a trade show or something like that. I would look at it as an opportunity that, maybe someday, I don't know, maybe someday I could be working for Coca-Cola or Reebok. And I would just go. And it was also, like, if I was going to be there for 6 hours and you're like regretting it and doing the minimum, your day's going to drag on. So, I just tried to bring the energy, tried to do it as well as I possibly could. My parents always said, look, you never know what's in store for you in the future, but whatever you do, you never know who's watching. Whatever you do, you just nail it. You nail it with enthusiasm, bring the energy. And if people want to be around you and are infectious, that's something that I don't think you'll ever be able to. You'll never be out of a job if you do everything that you do, with that type of passion. And that's what I try to do, And my kids who aren't, didn't do terribly well at school, but they're extremely social. Like, say for example, there's 2 cars and there's 7 people. Everyone will be trying to get into the car that my kids are in, that they have that type of personality. And so, and I think that because they do it with a lot of passion, they've been able to, kind of follow mine or my ex-wife's passion for doing things. We try and do things and have fun while we're doing it and do it well. And the kids have kind of followed that. And I think that was the main reason, like one of the reasons why the Kings came after me. And it's just made me kind of, you say something and it kind of makes me go, oh, that's right. Like Bob Turner, who ended up being a coach for the Sydney Kings. They had the Kmart Classic, which was in Sydney when I was playing for Hobart. And they had a jump rope for Hart that was performing at halftime of our game. And so we came out and we were early and they were still doing it. They were still jumping rope out on the court. And so they had a a kid who rolled his ankle or something. I said, "Oh, can I borrow your rope?" So I just got out there and started jumping rope with him. And I just thought it would be fun. And so Bob Turner said he never forgot that. He's like, "That's the type of player I want, that I could send out to the community and get people excited about playing basketball, somebody that's personable." So I think having that attitude and having playing for an organization that had corporate sponsorships and boxes and did things for their sponsors and sent players out to schools. We were one of the first programs to do that. Had a schools development program, and basically they would just send me out to do anything. They would actually send me if a player forgot it or was late or didn't show up. Then I was like, the cooler. They would send me to all the problem schools where we had disappointed the school, and then have me kind of smooth it over. So I think that the right circumstances, the team wanted to have their players branch out, and most of the players are reluctant to do that. And I was like, yeah, man, throw it to me. I want all the opportunities I could possibly have. And it kind of meshed with what we were talking about earlier. What am I going to do when my career's finished? And I figured every time I went and worked for one of those sponsors, I was planting a seed that I could work for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for anyone, I've been fortunate enough to work in front office before of professional clubs, and sometimes it can be a getting blood out of a stone to try and get players to go to some events. So I think it must have been a great marrying of the two. Someone that wanted to go out and was passionate and had the energy, and then obviously the club's desire to find someone like that as well. That sort of leads into my next question, Steve, is and you can sort of briefly touch on, I guess, because some people may be still wondering from the start, when we mentioned your career wasn't a 10-15 year career, and chat through sort of the injury that sort of forced you to pull the pin. But my next question was going to go then on to, did you pretty quickly in your first 12 months, once you'd made the decision to retire, hit up that network of contacts and go full time into the media?
I think that I had ideas of continuing to play, so when I was coming back from injury, I played for the Sydney Comets for like half of a season, and I played with some good players. They ended up winning the CBA the following year with Mark Riddle and Jerry Everett, Bobby Croker, some good players. They had a good team. Donnie Bickett, who played with Illawarra. They had a really good team. They ended up winning it. But so I wasn't sure. It wasn't like I was like, I've retired, I'm going on to the next chapter. I was like any other player, trying to hang on to those last few years. But I noticed that I couldn't play with the same intensity because I was a little hesitant. Like like when you're out of shape and your lower back is hurting, like it gets stiff.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had a back injury, I thought, I'm damaging my back. I don't want to be that old guy that can't walk anywhere. So I had that in the back of my mind. So, if you're thinking about being injured, you're really not going to be the player, that you want to be. So it slowly became, maybe this is time. So when I auditioned and it wasn't right away. So I got injured in the preseason of 91, and I didn't audition for the television job until the preseason of 92. So that whole 91, that time before I auditioned for the job, I was still planning on coming back or maybe naturalizing and having a lesser role, so I was toying with those ideas, having them dance around in my head. And so it wasn't like I had this grand plan. I had that in the background, and I was thinking about, maybe even going home and trying to, use my experience of playing ball and studying that in school and taking that over to the States and moving back home. And then I auditioned for the job at Channel 10, and I got it. And then my big break with that, and I was just calling Sydney Kings home games. And so then they were like, "Oh, we want the Sydney audience to have somebody from Sydney following the Kings." So I did all the Kings games. And then my big break came when they had jam session. So they had those NBA players came out to Darling Harbor, and Channel 10 sent me to do live crosses. And so I knew a couple of the players that were, Scotty Brooks was there, and I knew a couple of guys that were at it. And so I just had a really good rapport with them, and I did interviews with the mascots who they couldn't talk. So I had to talk, the whole time. And I was quite comfortable in front of the camera in a live situation. And so after that, the executive producer, I was told at a later date, said, we got to get that guy his own show. And so that's when I got Hoops TV. I had my own show. I got to, do demonstrations on how to do crossover dribbles and how to shoot your left hand, whatever, like that we did then. And so I just kept getting one break after another. And then I started working full time in television. So, I guess the answer to your question was, I didn't have this, I had a plan, but it wasn't executed, precisely. It was, I had as much self-doubt as anybody when my career was coming to an end. What am I going to do? Am I going to be any good at it? Am I ever going to get a full-time job? How is this going to lead into, I had every doubt, just like everybody else does when their career finishes. But because I had the ability to just throw myself into something and not worry about the consequences, and know that, I would still be able to bounce up and recover from whatever happened, that helped me as well. So it was kind of like a real messy storm that I really believed if I worked hard and I did it with passion, it would all come together, and it did.
Yeah, I think that's a direction or an attitude a lot of people should take. The Tony Doherty, for those in the bodybuilding circles, will know he created a clothing label called "Fuck Your 5-Year Plan," right? And it was all designed around the exact same thing which you're talking about, which is essentially just going for it, and throwing yourself in there. I guess when we look at situations like going into a new career, and I'll use that in loose terms because you'd obviously already been, in the process of, being, a host and a commentator and those sort of things as you started to exit your basketball career. Did they pair you up with a mentor? I mean, it sounds like you didn't really need one, to be honest. You just sort of, your energy and your passion just sort of threw you in there. But was there anyone that you would use to get critical feedback, to get better at your craft, anything like that?
I think every day, like I went in very humble, and it wasn't like I wasn't confident, and I always, when people say, oh yeah, he needs to be knocked down a peg, I'm like, I don't believe that. I believe that I want to encourage people's confidence, like they're walking around with a bit of swagger, as long as it's not disrespectful, like I can't stand it when somebody is 0 for 9 from the 3-point line. They finally hit one, and then they're doing a 3 dance, oh yeah, put it away, like you're too small, all that type of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, somebody that has a lot of self-belief, and they walk around with confidence. I love to see that, and I think that I had that even in television. I knew that I had the type of personality that people wanted to be around, that people wanted to listen to. I just didn't bank on my personality, like I'd go to practices, the day of the game, I'd go to a Brian Gorgian practice and watch some of the things that they were working on and incorporate that in my commentary, and I watched tennis games where, Wally Masur or, Jim Courier or John McEnroe, like all the great tennis commentators, like it's, I remember listening, Wally Masur was talking about, and I was sitting next to him, I was working in television, and he said, and I think tennis do it great. They don't bore the experts, and they explain things that you can look for in the game. And I wanted to incorporate that in my basketball commentary, not just state the obvious, what just happened, and explain what just happened. I wanted to say, right now, Adelaide are exploiting the fact that Brian Gorgian's team like to get in the passing lane. So they have a number of backdoor plays that don't allow you to push the defense out too far. And then it would happen, So I would try and get ahead of what was about to happen in the game. You know, in this test, I said they need a timeout because they need to talk about the bad shots that they're taking in transition right now. I said they haven't run their half court offense for the last 6 possessions. And so then they'd call a timeout and they'd come in and the coach would say, you know, what is our hurry? You know, we haven't run our half court offense for I don't know how many times, you know, so that's a buzz, you know, that's a buzz for me. And that comes through hard work, you know, like getting to know the personalities, getting to know the coach, doing the work of going to the shoot arounds, that type of thing. So I knew I had talent, but when I say that I was humble because I wanted to present well. You know, I think that when I first started in television, I didn't really think that I could actually turn my head. You know, I was so stiff and nervous. I was, you know, a bit like that. But you know, I got great advice along the way. I got to work with Billy Woods, who's just a master of live television. You know, we did the 5 o'clock news. He's an author. He writes fiction. He's incredibly intelligent. Billy used to say, God, if I had your confidence to go with his ability, you know, we'd be the greatest person on television ever. You know, but Billy said to me, Billy said to me, he goes, be yourself, you know, because the people watching TV aren't stupid. They can tell when you're not being yourself. Don't try and be something that you're not. You know, so when I told you before, I'm more of a storyteller than a motivational speaker. You know, I've got stories that are inspiring, but I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you I'm this wonderful person. So, you know, here's a motivational quote. You know, I'm probably going to tell you a story of how I felt uncomfortable and vulnerable, and then through my hard work was able to persevere. And so that's the motivation inside the story. So I think that, you know, that type of advice from Billy Woods telling me, be yourself, you know, that was like, okay, what am I good at? You know, and how will I be able to get that skill, you know, focused into what I'm doing right now? Work with John Casey. I've never seen anyone have the statistics that he has in his little black bag, and he never lets anyone touch his black bag, but he has a little black bag full of research. I reckon he's the smartest person that's ever worked in television. Like, he's too smart for TV. He should be like a politician or a world leader, you know, like he's that smart. But his ability to get that information inside of 5 seconds to be able to make it relevant. So, you know, it could be a stat about, well, you know, he's just, you know, broke the assist record last week and he's only got 2 assists tonight, you know, like, and he'll just, you know, somebody throws in, that's his first turnover that he's had in 3 games, you know, his ability to pull that information somehow out of his black bag and deliver it while it's still relevant in the game. I've never seen anybody do that like that. So, you know, his preparation, I was able to ask him questions and able to watch him on a daily basis and in his preparation for going on television, working on a live studio, those type of things has been invaluable, not just with television, but, you know, for my life afterwards, after I haven't been doing it.
Yeah, I think that's that all makes sense, really. I mean, when you listen to the great commentators and even in just the special comments, if people have done their groundwork and done their preparation, they just give you these little nuggets of knowledge that just speak volumes. You know, it just, you don't even need to know the person to know that they didn't just rock up 20 minutes before the game and take a seat in the chair. They've got notes, they've got preparation. You know, like John Casey that you mentioned, for instance. You know, you can watch a FIBA game and he'll know every player from the Czech Republic team and where they've played in the last 5 years and what club they play for back home, and like just super thorough. And I think fans really appreciate that. And then in terms of the confidence that you touched on before and having that, I hope a lot of people can sort of see through that if there's anyone listening to this podcast that sort of has some lofty goals or is starting to make some headway into what they're doing, is to sort of, you know, have that steely confidence to go forward, because unfortunately Australia's got a really nasty case of tall poppy syndrome, and they like to see you succeed, but as long as it's not more successful than they are. And and you still say, well, you see it all the time in social media these days. Even with the young guys up and coming, I remember early on Liam Santa Maria, used to cop it, and to be honest, I think he's a fantastic, well-researched journalist now on TV. And you've got Cam Luke and Peter Hooley, and you see them in their early career, and they just get the negative comments and just the negative vitriol is terrible. So I think to be able to just keep your head down, do your work, stay focused, and you obviously throughout the last hour have let us know exactly that you've had that the whole time, regardless of whether it was in junior sport or professional sport or going into work, was just going for it, and whatever happens, and just trying to see where your next opportunity was. Like, for the fact that you mentioned before, like, no one had to tell you to go down to practice and watch what they were doing. You take that upon yourself to go down there, see what they're doing. Sometimes it's just a little bit of initiative. And then like you said at the start, you don't know who's watching. Eventually that's going to shine a light with someone. You've given multiple examples of that. Even with the skipping rope and on the court. For others, there might be 99% of people laughing at that, going, "Oh, what's he doing out there?" And then all of a sudden, the person that matters goes, they have a light bulb moment. So things like that. I'll get on to my last couple of questions for you, Steve, because I'm cognizant of your time. With your career, and our first guest, Lucas Walker, really touched on this, but I'd like to have a chat to you about it as well, because you're someone that seems to just exude a lot of energy. We talked to him about how do you replace the highs and lows of professional sport outside of professional sport. And to give you a couple of examples, like Lucas mentioned that he could probably get the highs back if he's through his children and watching them and what they were doing. But the lows, he thinks he probably wouldn't. He's probably never been lower than he has been at some points in basketball. And then like Scott Fisher, for instance, said you just look at it at different periods of time. Like he's like, I probably get the lows because he said I'm a bit older than Lucas, and when you get older, people start to get grumpier. And he said then you have some people pass away, which on that, rest in peace, Cecil Exum, close friend of Scott's. So I just wanted to mention that, and former teammate. But he mentioned, he goes, I could play in front of, or he goes, what do you say? I shot 35 free throws in front of 35,000 people in a stadium in the States. But he goes, these days, I'm twice as nervous standing over a putt on the golf course. So he goes, he said you can replicate those highs and lows. So I guess, a long roundabout way of getting to it. But did you struggle with that? Did you find the energy of being a presenter on TV replaced it pretty well? Where were you at with that?
Yeah, I think that, I probably agree more with how Scott Fisher, because Scott and I are similar age. I'm older than Scott is, but as you get older, you just seem to handle the highs and lows a bit better. Your life starts to change. Things that were important to you before aren't so important to you now. You're not trying to, please others as much as, when you're older than when you were younger. Lots of things, contribute to that. So I would probably be erring more on the side of Scott Fisher. I mean, if I'm standing over a birdie putt, yeah, I'm a lot more nervous than if I'm standing over a bogey putt. But I think that that's that's a good one. I just think that your children, you have different challenges. Like say for example, my daughter lives in Melbourne now, and my concern is that she's not there with family. She's got a new job. She's out of her comfort zone. And although I think I just revel in the challenges of a new challenge. That doesn't necessarily mean my children do. Like I went away to college and had some tough times, and I don't know. I'm a little more. My parents just kind of would be like, hey, he can handle it. where I'm a little more like, I worry about my kids. I'm not saying my parents didn't worry about me, but different things, make me nervous, and it's usually my loved ones that I get nervous about. But dealing with the ups and downs, that's a difficult thing. I would say that Michael Jordan still hasn't successfully dealt with his life after basketball.
That's a good
He
point.
looks like a very miserable person.
Yes.
I'm watching him drink like a vat of scotch while he's doing that interview. Like he looks, he looks like he hasn't found anything yet, and that just goes to, and the reason I'm not picking on Michael Jordan, but
no, I know what you mean though. Yeah.
I just mean that as successful as he still is, like having, owning basketball teams and having, his shoe still sell more than any other shoe. He has had success once basketball is finished for him. He's had just as much, if not more, success financially, but he still looks lost. Like he looks like an angry, miserable man.
Yeah, there was a sadness in his eyes in that documentary.
Oh yeah, it is a real thing, and that is a great question. I know I've said that a few times, but that's a great question because, what are the highs and lows? Like where do you place your importance? And for me, I think that I'm very fortunate because I feel more fortunate than just about anybody because I can get excited about a well-lit petrol station that has healthy snacks. I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to pull in there. I can get excited about that. I can get excited about playing golf with some guys that I haven't seen in a while. And I'm so excited about playing golf with these guys that I'm picking my outfit the night before, so I can, yeah. Oh yeah. I think I wore the black outfit last time I played with these guys, I'm going to rock this one. My friend gave me a hat from, what's the most popular one? I can't think of it.
Like
from
Callaway or
Augusta.
Oh yeah.
The what's the name of that?
Yeah, Augusta National.
Yeah, Augusta National.
Yeah.
He got me a hat from there. I was like, oh yeah, let me try and work my outfit around this hat. So I feel very fortunate that I can get excited about very small things.
Yeah, it's
and
gratitude.
Not everybody
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah.
Gratitude. I just started, I shouldn't say I just started. I've been with my partner for 5 years. She's a health practitioner. She is a fertility specialist. So she knows quite a bit about diet that can influence, lots of different things. And so when we met, she was like, oh, I think you should take a blood test. I'm concerned about your visceral, fat, like, and every middle-aged man should worry about these things. And so I was like, yeah, okay. And so she's like, you should stay away from, let's try it for a month. And so I ended up, giving up bread, pasta, rice, things that I thought I could never give up. I did it for a month. I felt so much better. And so therefore, I was able to change. And then a number of other things started to get a lot better in my life just because I had these changes. And so I think even at 55 years old, I felt like, wow, you really can change. You really can have small victories that really give you, like a big prize, like sit there and go, wow, like, and then I gave up drinking. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, like if I have a drink now that I would spiral down and I'd be homeless. It's not like that. But it just also got me to think, oh, I want to get in front of things and not wait until it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I have to go to hospital or, I've got, my arteries are 70% blocked, like, let me get in front of things. So it's just kind of changed my attitude in a lot of different ways. And I think just age, like Scott Fisher said, age brings on, regular changes that you have to make if you want to continue to have a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I'll wrap it up there, Steve. I really, really appreciate your time this morning going into this afternoon and just the willingness to be pretty vulnerable there. I think there's going to be a lot of helpful advice in there. Not that you came on here to give advice or anything, but I think that's how we learn is through other people's situations when we can resonate with them. And when we can see sort of a different side of someone, and for your willingness to make the time to be on here is fantastic. And definitely encourage not just the hoops fans that are listening to this to listen to it, but it's probably going to be a podcast episode that I'd suggest if you've got sort of that 10 to 18-year-old sort of children, maybe get them to listen to it too, because there's going to be some fundamental lessons that around attitude, work ethic, and just being a little bit fearless too. Not because you think you're going to win every time, but because, so what if you lose and so what if you fail? And putting yourself in those situations where that might happen, because the reason I say this is the kids, and I've got a 9-year-old myself, live in this day and age where we don't see a lot of vulnerability. It's just highlights on Instagram and Facebook, and everyone's a winner, and and it's important, I think, that we see the other side of the coin, and then that helps us to go, well, that's not that different. We can work through that sort of stuff. So once again, thank you for coming on, and I'll put some links in the show notes. There are a few videos of you hooping out there on the YouTube, so I'll put them in there for the listeners, and they can go back and have a watch of that. I won't put your stand-up comedy routine, but they might want to find that themselves. That was a good one.
Yeah, my partner still hasn't seen that one, so yeah.
Oh, there you go. That. It'll be a Monday night of enjoyment. All right, Steve, thanks again, mate, and all the best going forwards.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, take care.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to get notifications of future episodes.